right. Well, Edward, why don't we ask you to start with the questions that you'd like to, or a question that you'd like us to answer.
Well, I suppose what's kind of occupying my brain at the moment, and I'm collaborating with some other independents, is using the downtime to think in terms of particularly what the public sector, but particularly healthcare sector might need post-COVID, so that we are primed and ready to be able to help as and when the adrenaline stops pumping, and workforce is exhausted, massive backlog with care, but what sort of support they need, and I think probably agility and resilience seems to be kind of key facets. So it's how to support organizations use the gains that they've made during this crisis, not lose them, and maybe mainstream them, embed them, make them sustainable.
Peter, you want to try that one on first, and then we'll open it up to...
Yeah, sure. I mean, I might be slightly reinterpreting the question, Edward, because I don't think it is for us as consultants to decide what might be right for them post-COVID. I think what this time gives, I mean, most organizations are either flat out at the moment, or most people in organizations are either flat out or they're working at home. What we're starting to see a bit of, and I think one of the things that will be invaluable, is to get collections of people from within the customer system, or within the organizational system together, and get them to start to think now about what they've learned, having gone into the, whatever you want to call it, how we've gone into the crisis. Because lots of organizations have, and you don't have to look that closely to spot them. You probably didn't read the thing I wrote last week. There's no reason why you should have done, but I did a piece.
Peter, everyone read it.
Everyone in the world read it. But
how would I get hold of that, Peter?
It's on. If you go to our website on the blog section.
Okay.
I just did a small piece. Sorry.
I can send it to you, Edward.
Okay, yeah,
great.
I did a small piece there about Tesco, and that was an outside-in view. But I think as consultants, we can help organisations to do an inside-out view of what have we learned. And one of the things what most organisations have learned is actually they can move quickly when they need to, and what they need to do is now capture what they've learned about how they moved quickly. They've learned a lot about how to work virtually, and what's made that successful, what the barriers are. Now, who knows what the new normal will look like? But I would money on organizations coming out of the end of this and moving into designs which have more virtual working than they had before. So there are lessons that have been learnt there. I think organizations that have been able to respond quickly have learnt a lot about their ESP, their enterprise system processes and planning, whether it's worked or whether it's not. And I guess the final thing I would say about that is the organizations that have been able to move quickly, in my opinion, are those organizations that really understood their operating model as they suddenly found themselves in crisis. Those that are struggling to move quickly, and we might look at how the government is trying to introduce testing. Those organizations that are struggling to move quickly are those that really don't understand the operating model that they're trying to intervene in. So Tesco's knew their operating model inside out. They knew their field to fork processes and were able to make changes very quickly to them. They knew their planning, their enterprise planning processes. They knew what resources they needed and were able to move quickly. So my summary of all that is, it doesn't take a lot of time to sit down and take a step back and say, what have we learned? What's worked well? What's not worked well for us? And capture that and save that as you go back into what I would call the new normal and start to think about the design changes you need to make.
Edward, I'll add to this and open it up to see what each of you have to add. We do something in our methodology called a current state review. And the current state review is modeling the current operating model and then literally running scenarios through it to see, to answer the question, how fit for purpose is the current operating model? It's exactly when Peter answered, I was thinking the first thing you do is almost like a post-mortem, and you can even do that virtually. Be a little bit difficult, or it's per Dennis's and Peter's insight is planning virtual work is 2 times more than planning work on site. So, and I'll come back to that, but I think it can be done. And the key here is having a very disciplined view of what an operating model is and what it's not. In other words, you don't want to get to the level of individual performance and Edward did this and Vera did that. So you want to stay at the operating model level. I think cosmetically, we all can see that all the businesses, one way they're being agile is having to work from home. But there's so much more beneath that cover beyond just working from home. Peter mentioned the enterprise-wide resource planning process. You have things like reporting and compliance and all kinds of things. I was speaking with a friend of mine who is a leader in an investment firm, and part of their culture was everybody came into the office, and it was pretty well ingrained in their culture. And in a very short period of time, they had to blow that apart and say, okay, nobody's working from the office. Everyone has to work at home. And I can tell you that they struggled a lot because they didn't have clear processes, clear governance. They didn't fully understand their operating model, and people who, everyone had a piece of the picture, but nobody really understood it. And it's part of the struggle for them. And it's taking them longer to do what needs to be done to work virtually. But I would echo everything that Peter has said, including the role of us as consultants. And I think healthcare, it'll be different for healthcare, but it'll be no different than any other business in terms of whatever that new normal is. How about we open that up? Anyone have some thoughts for Edward they want to share? Jilly, Vera, Dennis?
I think, this is Dennis, I would just, I would add to what Peter said, which I think is spot on, this idea of like, look at what worked and what didn't work during the crisis and make sure that those learnings are durable. But I also feel like, and this is a trap I've fallen into, is some things aren't changing. Like it feels like every single thing in our world has been turned upside down, personal life as well as professional life. And for me, I'm trying to remind myself that some things are actually not changing at all, and they don't need to change, and they shouldn't change, so that when the cloud of COVID finally dissipates, we don't try to go, well, now we have to live in a world where we continue to do everything differently. Like how we make decisions doesn't change. The mission of the organization hopefully doesn't change, unless the organization has almost gone under because the virus has led us to lose customers or whatever, and we need to retool. But that's something I'm reflecting on and helping my clients also see, like, some things are the North Star is still the North Star. So let's not think we have to change everything.
It's a great point. I think there's a little bit of a hyperbole out there about everything's going to change, and I think anyone who's making statements like that, they're in over their head, and they're just trying to build on the moment, because I'm in complete agreement with you. I mean, I still put my pants on the same way every day. I still, I still have to pay my bills online. I still have, there's things I do, and the things that you still have to turn the lights on. You still have to provide services or support your customers. It's just, you're absolutely right, Dennis. Somebody else, Jilly, how about from your perspective?
If I look back now, I think the one thing that, so doing the outside in view, but also taking stock of what we've done, we put some guiding principles down for ourselves in the first place, which we've lived by, and we built them on our values. And as corny as that sounds, it's worked. So even though we're getting a little bit of pushback because we're a key industry, because we're chemicals, around are we putting profit first, when we explained the supply chain that we're in, the pushback has been minimal, and the resilience I think people have shown. We were exactly that company that thought they had to come to work, and I've been on a crusade to the office to work. I've been on a crusade to open people's minds to flexible working, and I'm really looking forward to doing the told you so dance at the end. Because people have been absolutely phenomenal. And so I think there's something about, we've been obsessing a little bit about speed, not bureaucracy, for a while. And in our operating model, our matrix, everybody thought was really complex, but we've proved to ourselves that it's not. And if you get those involved that need to. So one of my observations has been, because people are so busy, not everybody wants to be involved in decisions and collaboration. They haven't realized it, but they're letting people get on with it instead of that old-fashioned need for, well, don't we have to do it by consensus? So the right people are involved. So that's been good. And the virtual working, we were already on Teams, and I was actually quite pleased from a health service point of view that the NHS were going to use Teams, because as a platform, I think it can make their working lives so much easier. And virtual prescriptions, virtual appointments, it just seems to take a lot of the old-fashioned stuff away, and that's what I think I'd like to take away from it all. And I think Generation X and Y are going to wake up to the technology, which will make them equal partners in the workplace. So I think if your operating model is geared towards one or the other, and our matrix is whatever our market is, and one of them happens to be electronics, we're getting more savvy at being our own customers in some ways.
Oh, that's a good one. Wow, that's great. Vera, anything to add?
Well, I can add the maybe case from high education. It's a university right now. And it's exactly what you have said about the operating model, what I like the most, that the university, public universities, they are used to be in contact with students for testing, for introduction, for exercises, to make some workshops, to do things together. And right now it's only Teams, the platform for communicating, lecturing, just one way that students are not used to speak. So, okay, it's like monology. And I like your idea that it's about changing operating model for this kind of education, that university students, they need to have different rules to meet online, to have different rules for examining, for evaluation, to have the judgment who is, I have to say, the black passenger. So that's the problem for students the most. So now I can see that for higher education, it's a big challenge right now, because it's an old operating model, but with the new situation, new technologies, new rules. And it's very, very hard right now to make it together, to work it together, to finish the lectures, to finish the subjects. And the feedback is that students are happy, but also they are very unhappy or dissatisfied. So yeah, so this is the case, and I will see what will be at the end of the semester. So then I will tell more, because I do not have any other right now experiences with what's going on right now.
Got it. Thank you for that, Vera. Ed, do you prefer Ed or Edward?
Either way is fine.
Yeah, so Edward, did we at least try to attempt to answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, that was really helpful. I think the zeroing in on the operating model and kind of the maximum of know thyself is helpful, and I'm you know, being aware that not everything is changing, and probably amplifying those things that are staying the same that actually serve you well. One thing that is becoming more of a reality. So before COVID was more of a view of kind of collaborations across organizational boundaries and across sectors, thinking that each public sector pound can only be spent once. And there was a view before all of this that we needed to move towards a kind of more of a system-wide view of things. COVID has shown that collaborations can happen across boundaries where previously there'd been animosity. And I'm just wondering, I can see the sense that you're saying in terms of what it might mean for individual organizations, but in terms of then how to synthesize that learning for cross-boundary collaborations, for system-wide operating models which people really struggle to get their heads around. I'm just wondering how can I be most helpful in guiding multiple organizations who are trying to collaborate through that process?
Well, the first thing I would say to you is follow the work and follow the customers. And if you apply that lateral thinking, regardless of where that work gets done or which organization does that work, to me, therein lies the secret sauce to uncover where do we need to collaborate. So if you're focused on the health and well-being of a citizen, particularly during this time of COVID, of the virus, asking who are all those organizations that do that, and how are they interdependent in terms of their work in serving that customer. I think when you focus on the work and not the boundary, and you focus on what are we trying to do and for whom, and you look at the interdependence, I think that's the secret to starting to think about, well, who cares who does it, and should we be talking with each other and linking up more strongly. There's nothing like a crisis for people to get out of our own way, because our natural tendency is to clan, which means, oh, this is ours and that's yours, and we create these boundaries that don't always work, particularly when it comes to serving a patient or a customer. But I think that, I'll go back to follow the work and follow the life cycle, if you will, almost like an ecosystem view of that customer or that patient. And I think you soon see work going outside of boundaries and organizations into other organizations, which then set up the question, well, why aren't we collaborating, and how do we glue ourselves up or work more closely together? Peter, would you add anything to that?
No, I think I would say, I'm going to say the same thing slightly differently. I think it is about rethinking the boundary. So what you said, Mark, it's about, if you've got an end customer, you've got to think about everything that goes into delivering whatever that product or service is to that customer, and put a boundary around that, even though the bit you're thinking about might just be a sub-boundary within that much larger boundary. If you do that, you start to think quite differently about the ecosystem that you're operating within. And I, without repeating myself too much, I was deliberate with my words when I was talking about Tesco, because what Tesco have done and what they've talked about doing, and what I've forgotten his name now, the new CEO talked about doing, is we had to think, to be able to make Tesco's work effectively in this crisis, we had to think field to fork. So they didn't just think about themselves as an organization in a chain that got from the farmer to the table in my house. They rethought their supply chain in a field by thinking about it from field to fork, and brought their suppliers in and brought other people in, so that they could make changes very quickly. Because what they recognized was there was no way they could change the supply chain and get their shelves filled again if they didn't involve the whole of the boundary that covered the work that went from field to fork. So it is about rethinking resetting your mindset around what the boundary is, because everybody always thinks about their boundary being their function or their organization. If you start from how do you get from the very basic raw material to the product or service for your customer, think that is the boundary, you will think differently about how the work gets done.
Yeah, and what creates value for that customer or that patient? What are those things? And then saying, if you start with where that work gets done, it's very difficult to get out of the gravitational pull of that planet, the legacy. Anyone, anything to add? Dennis, Jilly, Vera, or Edward?
Nope.
Not right now.
Well, thank you very much for all your contributions. That's enormously helpful. I feel very privileged.
Well, you're welcome, Edward. You're welcome. Jilly, how about for you? What might we answer for you today, or what? I know you've got several design projects going on. It'd be interesting to know how they're moving in this environment, if at all.
Well, that was, I mean, neither of the ladies leading them are on, because they are working flexibly with their families and child schooling, etc. But it's actually increased the importance of their work. So, for instance, one of the projects, as you know, was quality, and it's grown legs into other areas because quality was in so many different parts of our matrix. I'm going to say incorrectly. So I was looking for some hints and tips how, if you know what people are doing to keep the pull going virtually with the customers, and how, if you think about the world of Post-its that you guys support, what are we doing instead of that so I can help them?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that, Jilly, because we're going to pass it. Dennis, I'm going to give it to you for a little bit, and just a little bit. Maybe Peter, you want to respond to Jilly first, and then we can go from there and go to Dennis.
Yeah, I'll set it up for Dennis. I was thinking about this when Vera was talking. So one of the things I do in my spare time is lecturing at one of the universities in the UK. And one of the things they suddenly had to face up to was, how do we keep lectures going and how do we keep tutorials going when we can't bring people together? And what was really useful for them was their business school. A chunk of their business school is totally virtual. So they were able to very quickly bring process and procedures and systems and practices across from the business school into the core undergraduate and postgraduate face-to-face learning environments. What's interesting in doing all of that, and these are all really sort of little things, I think, is trying to design what we're doing so that we don't have too many people in the room at the same time. So to some extent, splitting things up so that you're creating virtual social groups. So one of the things we always do, and actually we've been doing this in OTM as well, is don't make every call or every virtual session about work. People used to get together around the water cooler. They used to get together for coffee breaks and this, that, and the other. Make sure, what I found is useful anyway, is to make sure that you keep that social element in place and separate it from the work so that people don't feel, whether embarrassed is the wrong word, they don't feel under pressure to jump into the work because you're having a virtual coffee break rather than you're together having work. So there's that piece around keeping the social cohesion in place and not allowing the work to be the be all and end all, because actually in the physical office, work isn't the be all and end all. Right. The other thing, and this is my lead in for Dennis, is there are some really good tools out there that enable you to get much more collaborative working on a virtual call or on a virtual session. Now, we've been using them in the university for seminars and for running case studies, but Dennis has got more experience than I have of actually using the virtual tool sets to build collaboration and sensible. You know, you said people are getting faster at decision making. You need to make sure that that decision making is still effective in the sense that people don't come back later and say, well, you forgot to ask me. So I think that using some of the tools is a good, or using the right tools certainly helps.
And Dennis, if you don't mind, before you jump in and talk about the tools that you shared with us, one of the things, Jilly, that I think is key to kind of keeping the poll going is to have a plan and show the practical steps. And I think one of the things that I've talked with about other organization design firms is that they don't have as well-defined set of decision tree steps, activities, what decision comes first, second, third. And I think to make design work happen online and virtual is you need a very rigorous methodology that you're going step by step by step, and you know whether we're doing problem solving or we're generating a concept design, so it's going to be creative, or are we making a decision and what's all the information needed to go into that decision. So I think you have to be very clear about those steps. And as I said, and you'll probably hear Dennis say this because I think it's worth saying, is whatever prep time it takes your team, Lindsay and others, to prepare for a face-to-face meeting, for the online meeting, you can double it. So if it's 2 to 1 for planning and preparation before you do a face-to-face meeting, it's probably 4 times the amount of time to prepare for an online meeting, because I think it's difficult to do with just one person. So I was
just going to say, one of the things is they're doubling up, which sounds extravagant, but actually it probably saves time.
Exactly correct. Dennis, you want to kind of talk about the tool and maybe what's some of your wisdoms from the facilitation you're doing, the virtual facilitation?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. And you know, this for me, this last month has been an epiphany. I have this pattern in my life of knowing what I need to do and just procrastinating and not doing it until some universal force pushes me into doing it. And this COVID has been that force to say, finally, Skinner, you need to figure out how to do what you do in a room on a virtual call. And until now, I've been, you know, if a client's asked me like, hey, I need to do an online workshop, I'm like, I'm not your guy, because you just can't do it. You know, the body language and the ability to tactily interact with artifacts and move quickly from dyads to tables to a breakout room and back to a plenary session. You can't do it online with a Google Doc, a shared Google Doc. And finally, I think the tools have caught up to the problem. And I did a bunch of research and kind of narrowed it down from 6 platforms that are available down to 1 that I've kind of invested in. And there's actually a couple, and I'm thinking about being bilingual and learning both of them. But one is called Mural, M-U-R-A-L, and the other is called Miro, M-I-R-O. Say them fast, they sound like the same tool, but they're completely different. But basically what these are, they're just an online infinite blank canvas that can be zoomed in and zoomed out. And in that canvas, you can set up areas with templates that mimic what you would do with flip charts on a wall in a room.
And Post-its.
And Post-its, exactly. And all of the participants on the Zoom call or WebEx or whatever move over to the shared canvas. And with your help as a facilitator, they can interact simultaneously by generating Post-it notes, moving them around, breaking out into small groups to do some work, and bringing the important artifacts from that work back to a larger canvas so we can all see them and report them out and work on them. There are electronic dot voting tools where people can go click on the stickies that they like, and it automatically tallies the votes and sorts them for you. You can do flow charts and work stream maps or value stream maps, and pretty much anything you would do with a Post-it note, flip chart, whiteboard in a room, you just do on this canvas that everyone has visibility into and can work on simultaneously.
Simple question, Dennis. Do you do it through something like Zoom or Teams? Is it as well as?
Yes, as it is, as well as. So you need the video conferencing platform, which is separate from the collaboration platform. So, you know, as I'm setting up the exercises, I'm sharing the mural canvas, those pieces which I want them to look at. And then when we launch the activity, they move from Zoom over to Mural and they do their work.
So thanks, Dennis.
Jilly, you can, one of the things I really like about it is, and this is something, Reagan, we should make a note of this as we're moving into this world. For those of you like you and your team who've been through our training, we should make those templates available, but you can customize templates in Mural to, like, for example, our value stream schema, so that it uses the exact same schema. You can customize all those before you do the work. So any templates or tools that we have in our methodology, you can also then put into Mural, and those are, you have those.
Now that sounds heaven sent. So Edward, you're probably wondering why I'm making such a fuss. If you've done the On the Mark training, they pretty much own 3M for the amount of Post-it to use of every different size. So it's such a big part of the learning, and it's an absolutely fantastic process. So I'm just trying to think now, 5 of my team have been trained at various stages in their careers. So we're kind of wedded to a way of working. And this is, I guess, Mark, my question, and you've all answered it, is how do we then update that way of working into this new way of working to show that we're not dinosaurs?
Right. I think, you know, I think what we have to do is, so we're starting to take this on ourselves, Julie. And I think as we create those templates for ourselves, Reagan, we need to distribute those to anyone who's done the training with us in the last year or two. And we have that list in our database, including Jilly's team, and just say, we're using this with Mural. Here they are. I'm assuming, Dennis, we can share those outside, pull them out of Mural since we've created them. Is that correct?
That's right. Well, you can share them with other Mural users,
right.
Or you can create a PDF and send it so people can see what it looks like.
Sounds brilliant. So the feedback they've had for the 2 interventions they're doing have been phenomenal. We've finally got senior leaders in the business knowing that HR doesn't just do recruitment.
That's a big deal, Jill.
That's huge.
It is for me. But they've all of a sudden, everyone's gone, oh my God, this is fantastic. This is all the stuff we've never thought of. We can see every wisdom, the pay now to pay later, go slow to go fast, is just, they can all see it and feel it, and they're wanting to carry on satisfying their customers. So anything we could do would be wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, and Jilly, as you kind of decide on Mural, or you're looking out there.
I want you to decide for me. That sounds far too technical.
Well, we're gonna go with Mural. So
there's our answer then.
So that's what we're going to go with, and we're about 3 days ahead of you, or 2 days ahead of you. So,
okay.
So anyway, so we'll let you know what we learned, but certainly, and if we can put you in touch with Dennis directly, and since he's about a month or 2 ahead of us. So.
And we're happy to share feedback back with you guys about how it goes when we're using it, so that you can relay it to other clients.
Perfect.
Vera, how about for you? Any questions you want to ask?
Well, I have like two areas about org design, and one is about this HR, the previous workshop you had, and it was about the work with HR people. One thing is how you like consult and shape the people from HR departments to really go for some change, and other thing is how to influence other people from outside of HR departments to accept that HR will be something different.
Wow. Okay, those are really good questions. Peter's, I can see the smile. I can almost channel Peter what he's going to say. And the fact that we have Jilly on the call.
I was going to say, I've done it so many times, Vera. Right. I want to come and help you.
Right. Jilly, I'm gonna ask you. Let me. I'll
go last.
Yeah, so you have 2 questions. So sometimes working with HR, particularly, and Jilly is, I provided Jilly this feedback, so this is nothing she hasn't heard before. Jilly is delightfully one of the, unfortunately, more rare exceptions to an HRD or CHRO who really understands organization design and understands the importance that plays in the business as well as in HR. But you don't always get that with every CHRO, and they try to, well, whether they're implementing a new HR model, the term that comes to mind is the shoemaker's children, right? Is that the shoemaker makes shoes for everyone in the community, but maybe doesn't do it for his or her own children. And we find that quite a bit in HR. And that's the first thing I'll say. And the second thing I will say is, and then I'm going to let Peter share some things, is that in working with HR, one of the things that's often forgotten is the impact on the business, which has to be brought in very early and upstream. It's the classic designing from the inside out rather than from the outside in, which is then another mistake that many designers make, which is instead of starting with who are our customers and what delivers value for them. And this ties in Edward's first question, which is how to work cross boundaries, is when you think about HR needs line leaders to do their work. And if you think about it just functionally, then as opposed to thinking about what delivers value for their internal customers and who are their customers and who is all involved with delivering HR to the customers, they're completely different answers to the question. So Peter, I'm gonna let you kind of talk to the fourth involving line leaders, maybe a little bit in your experience, because Peter used to be also CHRO.
Yeah, I've done this a couple of times this call, but I'm going to paraphrase a bit what Marcus said. The fundamental mistake that HR can make when it comes to do a redesign is to look at the boundary around HR and say we're going to redesign everything within that boundary, because that touches on Mark's point, and I'll say it slightly differently. Is you've got to think about the work of human resource management and everything an organization needs to do to manage the people within that organization. That's the HR work, and that's the thing you put the boundary around. And it will involve employees, because employees are doing some of the work. It may well involve people who aren't even yet employed by the organization. So just thinking about the scope of where the work is. It'll certainly involve line leaders. It will almost certainly involve external suppliers, depending on the extent to which HR work is currently outsourced. So the first thing to make sure you do is get everybody in the organization, not everybody in the organization, but do a complete diagonal slice of the organization to get a clear scope of work on what is HR work, and put your boundary around that and say that's what it is we're going to redesign. The other fundamental error, and I will own up to this one, because the first redesign of HR that I did way back in the mid-90s, I fell into the trap of trying to design around a system. And what you've got to do is just treat the HR systems as another thing within the organization that does HR work, and redesign the whole of the work. And in doing that, redesign the systems to fit the operating model you want for HR. Don't try and organize HR around a predetermined set of internal processes within a system. And my final thing is, as you're doing all of that, involve everybody who's involved in HR work. So it is not HR's job to redesign HR, because they are only doing a subsection of the total HR work. Involve everybody in the end-to-end HR delivery process. Jilly, you've got the scars. You've got the most recent scars.
I know, but I'm just feeling it from what you've said. So Vera, this is like a pastime of mine, and I don't mean it to be. But I think the best thing that ever happened to me was it was done unto me. So when I first came across Mark and the team, they actually redid the organisation for HR for British Airways when I was there, and then we were all trained to apply the same skill set, thought process to our business areas. And living through it made me realise the power of doing it properly. And so I guess just trying to pull out a few anecdotes from everything that's been said. I think when I've joined companies, I've taken the first year to find out what the dissatisfaction is with HR from that wider customer group. Okay. And I've been really alone in my thought process, don't make any friends, don't make any assumptions, and then really started to turn the pressure up. And I use some of the toolkit backwards. So I ask things, so Mark and Peter, if you didn't know this, I do things like, where's the decision-making power? Who owns 51% of that? Where is it in the model? What's driving this? Is, you know, what's the gravitational pull? Just because our matrix model is product leadership, what do we stand for? What aren't we doing? So I take the whole of the process that you know that you're going to go through and just start throwing bits and bobs in as I go along. Typically, I've made my mind up if we're going to make a change or not. So losing 40%, I'm usually pleased about. Last time I got 57% of leadership change in the team as a result of reorganizing HR. And looking back 2 years, it wouldn't change a thing. Don't look for shortcuts. It's not worth it. It's really not worth it. And I also do what are we going to insource if you assume everything's outsourced? And then people really do start to think about things differently, is what I've found. And then just telling people it's okay that we've missed stuff and keep embedding it. So we're now 2 years into this recent one. And using our value chain has really helped us test ourselves. So we've got very clear value chain. I've got engineer brains on the team, and we use it all the time for our customer requests. And we talk about our products, our HR products. We don't talk about disciplines, so we don't try and baffle the customer anymore. We talk their language, platforms, products, service. And it seems to be working. But I guess my biggest piece of advice is let somebody outside do it to you and participate, because otherwise you can't be impartial to it. And that's worked really well for me too many times now, I think. Have I missed anything, Mark?
Well, I don't know, Jilly. You know, I'd love to be a fly on the wall and follow you around in the 2 or 3 or 4 leadership roles you've had where you've done this work. So I think that's a good summary. And you know, Vera, if you want to, Jilly, if she has any more questions, can she connect? Of course. With you directly?
Vera, I do it for fun.
Thank you. It would be wonderful, because this is for example, for Czech Republic. It's okay. We used to have some systems here for government, and now it looks like when I go to organizations, usually there is HR department, which makes the HR recruitment. That's cool if they are doing it. And then I found some very cool organizations that doing stuff for astronauts and for stuff like that. And their HR is just evidence of positions and evaluation, which is just smiling, because the people cannot do evaluations because they have 15 minutes for one person. And one leader has, for example, 150 people underneath. So I'm just smiling because it's not working how we teach normal HR stuff. But if I can imagine, they would like to change. They would like to change a little bit their operating model. They want something else. But it's really, really old-fashioned style of working. And I cannot imagine how to make people in HR to understand that it's about different stuff, and also the CEO and top management team and middle managers to accept that HR is about something else. So it's like two groups that they are like needs to some shift in mind, not only HR, but also the inner outer wider world in organization.
You know, Vera, that change takes time. So,
Yeah.
but, you know, I think, you know, Jilly's comment of talking the business language, talking about HR, using the exact language that the business uses to talk about their parts of the work is exactly right. And her team members doing design work, you can't tell others that you're into that place. They have to experience it and see it firsthand. And that, I think that takes a little bit of time. We've got just about 2-3 minutes left. Peter, do you want to add anything to what Jilly's saying for Vera?
No, I think the only thing I would add is just make sure you've got a very good wine supplier.
Supplier, okay.
Yeah, and don't make it virtual, make it real.
Yeah, it's got real wine. Yeah, virtual meetings with real wine.
Oh, yeah, no such thing as Dennis. I don't think we have a tool for that right yet online.
Not yet, but don't think I'm not looking for it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Vera, one of my most trusted team members about 15 years ago, said to me, never trust an HR person who doesn't drink.
Oh, okay, good.
Phew, I got away with that one.
Oh gosh. Well, I think on
She's
that note,
American, just to say.
Okay, but still we drink a lot too.
well, good. Well, Reagan, how about if I, first of all, thanks everyone. Reagan, you want to close it up for us?
Yeah, this was a very fun, timely conversation. And I can say personally, as someone who isn't a practitioner of organization design, I always love hearing what everyone has to say and the way people contribute. So thank you for joining. And of course, if you have any further questions, you can reach out to Mark, myself, Peter, and Edward. I'll definitely send you those blog posts that Peter was mentioning.
Thank you.
So Reagan, can you send Vera Jilly's email?
Yes,
and
I will do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So
And Jilly, if we'll send you Dennis's as well, and you can have that as well, so I can drop that to you. Are you okay with that, Dennis?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're already connected, aren't we, Dennis?
We are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So keep in touch.
Yeah, where have you been, Jilly? All right, everyone, stay healthy and safe, and all our best.
And oh, one other thing, we're also having another webinar on April 21st, where we're going to be featuring other internal practitioners from different companies to discuss kind of how they operate within their own organization and different tips. So look out for that, and we'll have more information on that shortly.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks for a great session today. Really apprecited it.
You're welcome,
Okay.
Edward.
Welcome, Edward. Good to have met you virtually.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.